Welcome back to the Balance Boldly podcast for ambitious women in business and a few brave men. I'm your host, Naketa Ren Thigpen, always excited to be in the place with you. As we dive deeper in this particular part of the year, going forward into 2025, regardless of the time that you are listening to this episode, I have to remind you all how important it is to really kind of sit center with what you want the most. What is your truth? What are you going after? What are you creating? Why are you doing all the things you're doing and wearing all the hats that you're choosing to put on? Now, I'm not talking about the hats that are forced on you because of responsibility, being a human of a certain age that might have parents of a certain age that now you're kind of sandwiched between caregiving for them in whichever way that is true for you. They don't always have to live in your home. It's still a big responsibility. You may have children, pets, dogs, or frogs. Those things are kind of forced on you because you're a good human and you want to make sure that you're contributing to your inner world in the most intimate and supportive way you can. But then there's also hats that you choose, especially if you are a founder or a high achieving leader that's listening to the BBP, as most of our audience is. You know how important work-life balance and relationship management strategies are for your sanity, right? We're not talking about 50-50, how to split everything equally. We're saying, what is it that you really want and how are you creating those boundaries to achieve that want as a true reality? And today, I have a very special guest that is actually showing up and doing her version of work-life balance. You know, we call it Balance and Boldly over here. Ideal title of the show, right? We want to introduce you to Ashley Stanford. She's a digital marketing consultant and freelancing expert with more than 15 years of experience in the digital marketing space. In addition to this, she's an EVP of Client Strategy at TicketSocket and Vice President and co-founder of Ice Cream Social, which is backed by Comcast, NBC Universal, and Sports Tech. That was a mouthful. And just think of all the hats that you just heard her choosing to wear. Ashley, welcome to the BBP. How are you today?
Oh, I'm so good, Naketa. Thanks for having me. I love the subject matter that you cover on the BBP, so I'm super excited to share.
Thank you. I'm happy to have you here for so many reasons. You and I were talking in the green room, just kind of organizing ourselves, getting everything together. And one of the things that I was thinking about that I didn't ask you while we were getting situated is what empowered you to choose to wear the specific hats that you are wearing daily?
Sure, that's a great question. I think it's a couple
it's like, why did I do
things.
This to myself, right?
Yeah. Well, I'd say one thing that happened, I don't know, maybe about 8 years or so ago, I hit that wall, that complete burnout, and it was extreme to the point where I couldn't turn on my computer for several months. I couldn't work at all. It was not good. And so that essentially led me to a place of deep self-reflection.
Yeah.
And then, so you're probably asking, well, it sounds like you still have a lot going on. Why after all of that? And, you know, there is a book that I read that I love, and it's called The Desire Map by Danielle Laporte.
Yeah.
And it's more of a workbook, really. And I have done this workbook essentially several times throughout my adult life. And during this, you know, dark night of the soul period that I went through, was one of the times that I did this workbook. And if you're not familiar with this book, essentially what she does is she has you audit every area of your life in a very beautiful way. And you go really deep. And at the end of the workbook, you come out with what she calls core desired feelings.
Yeah.
And you have about 3 to 5 that you essentially want to be feeling on a day-to-day basis. Now, we're all human. Not every day is perfect, but for the most part, this is how you want to feel day in, day out. And I've learned to use those core desired feelings as my decision filter.
Nice.
Essentially, yeah. I could keep going, but
No,
that
this
has
is
helped me
good
a lot,
juicy
and just,
stuff.
yeah, figuring out what opportunities I take on, what
Yeah.
passion projects. I'm sure a lot of listeners, just being entrepreneurial, spirited, uh, sometimes we have shiny object syndrome. Sometimes we
Mhm.
have way too many ideas, way too many passions just boiling inside of us and not sure
Mhm.
which ones to act on. And so I've learned to kind of filter through those opportunities based on my core desired feelings.
No, I appreciate that. Do you mind sharing what maybe your primary core desire feeling is?
Yes. So I would say, so I've done this workbook. I'm not sure, maybe 4 or 5 times throughout the last many years of my life. And the first time that I did it, one word came through, which was freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And I I live in the United States, so we have a very spoiled definition of freedom. So I'll
Come on.
just caveat at that. So
Mm-hmm.
apologies if this sounds a little surfacey, but I was very young. I had a newborn baby, and my definition of freedom then was finances. Like, I wanted to be able to afford the things I needed, diapers, formula, all the things when you're starting out as an entrepreneur. And,
Absolutely.
that is a motivating factor a lot of times. It's more of like a survival mode. Um, and then as time went on and seasons of life changes, and I've redone that workbook, that word still always comes through, freedom. But the
Mm.
definition has changed for me over time.
Yeah.
As I got older, it was more about time freedom. Okay, now I've got
Mm-hmm.
2 kids and a business, and I don't have time for myself to take care of myself.
Yeah.
And then, fast forward to today, it's more about opportunity freedom. Once you've built a level of financial freedom, time freedom, then you can kind of have that, what do I want to work on? What
Yeah.
do my next 20, 30 years look like?
Yeah. It's the choice is always leading for me. And I say that my kids are grown,
Mm,
so I'm at a different space. My G babies, my grandbabies are probably the same age as your kids at
uh,
this point. And I've told both of them, both of my young adult children, since they were little, giving yourself opportunity for choice is the most beautiful
mm,
gift. Like that is freedom. Is not
yes.
feeling like you have to, underlying HAVE, right? You have to do
Yes.
this one thing because that's your only option, versus you being able to say, you know what? I may choose to do this because it's the best thing. It might not even be the
Mm-hmm.
preferred thing, but it's the best thing for me to do in this hour of my life, this chapter of my life.
Yeah.
And I know that I'm doing this because it's giving me more choices as I, exit this one kind of chapter and enter a new one. And then eventually a new book altogether. We're no longer even in the same
Right.
story, just a whole entire one. So I appreciate what you're sharing because you utilizing a tool, which is really important. And there are lots of tools that are out there, but this is a good one. I'm very familiar with it. Using Desire Map for your specific preference as the tool to really just kind of help you pull out what was already there. It didn't necessarily give you new information, but it helped give vocabulary to feelings,
Mm-hmm.
emotions, thoughts, chaos that was inside that maybe you were struggling with at those different chapters. And it's honestly not just a bold thing, but a brave thing to do, to choose to do the inner work, which a lot of people who are wearing those multiple hats of, EVP and VP and also a founder, multi founder, should I say, as maybe serial entrepreneur, also investor, you're also a mom, right? Like you add in all of those beautiful layers to you, you could easily have had a different mindset, and one that says, well, I do this because I have to do this because it's the only thing that I can do
Mm-hmm.
in order to, put diapers on the kids, to use that original
Right.
example
Right.
that you gave. And for some people, we get locked into not understanding that it's just a season. It's just a season
Yes.
of have to, that hopefully, if you're strategic about your have to, it's specifically to open up those opportunities for more choice. So I appreciate that you gifted yourself that, because that new multi-generational imprint that you created for your little humans is now they understand by modeling. They don't have to get stuck in a have to mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And even if they choose to for a moment, it's a choice because they know that it's leading to something else. That's one of the most precious things that you can do as your gift to the world. And it is a first world privilege to be able to do it. So I recognize it as well.
Absolutely. Yes.
And in that, you still didn't have to take it, right? You still didn't have to do
Yeah.
it, and you chose it.
Yeah.
Good stuff, Ashley.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're
At the
welcome.
time, I didn't know that. That's just how it unfolds. At the time, it is that
Yeah.
survival mode. This is what I got to do, and I'm locked in. And this is, I guess, what we call life.
Yeah.
So
And
I love that we can share that. It doesn't have to
it
be
doesn't
like
have
that.
to. Yeah. And you could have, I don't think you know my background as a psychologist and trauma specialist and all the things, relationship expert, like all the things in my background. It's a lot, which is why I just say balance and relationship advisor, because I have a lot of tools under that hat now.
Yeah.
But with that, I've seen a lot of people in a similar situation to the highlight reel that you've given that didn't take that choice. In survival
Hmm.
mode, that wasn't the option to go deeper, to be more
Yeah.
intimate with themselves and really choose themselves. Hard, guttural, yucky work that often accompanies it, tears, snot falling on the floor and trying to figure
Yes.
out how to get going, but knowing that that was the pathway through where you were, and you knew that that wasn't what you wanted to continue to have, at least not in that moment. I'm sure that there in church we say things like backslide. Like, I'm sure there were some backslide moments that,
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
maybe I could have done something differently along the way.
Absolutely.
But the fact that you kept moving forward ultimately, even with those little kind of pivots and pitfalls, that fact that you were moving forward, it matters. And you move forward to, I'm like looking at your bio that I pulled up, you've created quite a bit, mama. Like, you haven't, this isn't anything to sneeze at. And I only read like a sentence of a very long bio.
Oh,
And I
thank
have to
you.
ask you, what made you decide specifically with some of the actual businesses that you chose? Like, how did that support your work-life balance and your ability to create, positive, healthy relationships from the workplace to potentially to home?
Sure. So I think originally when I started this kind of more entrepreneurial,
Mm-hmm.
intrapreneurial path, I knew that I always wanted the flexibility
Mm-hmm.
to kind of create my day. That didn't always happen, but
Understand?
I knew it was an end goal. And, my children were very much a motivating factor in that.
Yeah.
And I quickly learned, part of it, I will say, is luck. I got lucky in surrounding myself with the right people in business that became lifelong mentors at this point
Nice.
and people that I like to work with. And I haven't always, I've definitely worked with people that I haven't enjoyed working with.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but having kind of that foundation of a few core people in my life that I've always had a great business relationship, which has turned into friendship,
Mm-hmm.
which has just become my foundation and kind of like my reality filter of, oh, I don't have to keep working with this client or this person if it doesn't feel good, because
Right.
that affects my day to day and how I'm feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And I do have a great example of what that can look like. And uh, part of that really is luck, just a little bit of luck, creating that opportunity out there, networking, meeting the right people, learning from mistakes. But
Yeah. And
been
also
very
new
fortunate.
boundaries, right? Like
Yeah.
learning from
Yes.
those, like you said, those clients or those subject matter experts or partners that you had worked with in different versions of the hats that you wear, and realizing they weren't ideal for your mental health, for your sanity, or even for your productivity. Because I'm thinking about previous clients that I've worked with. I've only had to fire a couple clients in my whole 13 years of owning a company, but they definitely impacted my ability to be productive on those days when I had to have sessions with them or have to meet with them or even have to think about anything related. And I was like,
Yeah.
this is not helpful.
Right.
It's also not healthy, but it does cause you to create new boundaries. And it does help that you have healthier relationships with those previous or simultaneous business partners and mentors and sponsors and things that are now also friends, which are sometimes the best relationships when you can switch hats that way. But I
Absolutely.
think they help strengthen your boundary a little bit because you're like, oh, I definitely don't have to deal with this. This doesn't
Yeah.
have to be normal.
Yes, absolutely. And just boundaries in general. Obviously, reaching a level of extreme burnout was something that I had a rough time learning.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of being that people pleasing
Yeah.
mentality for a long time. And even thinking the great relationships that I have were not good, but really it was a matter of boundaries and being able to
Mm,
adjust those over time and
yeah.
realize that sometimes I am the problem and there's work to do.
Yeah, I mean, kudos to you for acknowledging that, right? Because there's a lot of, how do I say this kindly? A lot of stories or examples that are often given that are specifically about other people being the problem. You know, this other
Mm-hmm.
human did XYZ to me. And although both can be true, right? Like someone could have done
Yeah.
something that caused you to, as my younger self would say, knock you off your square and show a different
Mm-hmm.
version of yourself that you're not proud of. But knowing that that version of yourself needs work and taking acknowledgement of that and then actually following up and doing the work is all separate things that many people get stuck and stop, along the way. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yes.
Good job for you. All right. So I have to ask you because you're wearing multiple hats that you're choosing
Mm-hmm.
to wear, which are good, juicy hats. You're modeling as effectively, appropriately as you can for your littles, which I'm assuming that they're still little.
I have a 14-year-old, 11-year-old, and one in the oven. So,
Oh, yeah. So
yeah.
a little bit bigger and little to come. So
Yes.
I love
Across
that.
the board.
Yeah, across the board. And those are really, really good ages too.
Yeah.
Ooh, you're going into multiple dynamics with preteen and
Mm.
teen and then infancy
Yeah.
again. Kudos to you.
Yes.
It's one of those things where
Yes.
I'm like, better you than me, honey.
Yeah.
One of those. But it's a beautiful
Oh,
thing.
yeah.
So congratulations.
Thank you.
But as you're like wearing all these hats and navigating, this childhood again, basically, raising another human again, almost, I don't want to say starting from scratch because that sounds like so much work,
Yeah.
but deciding to enter into a new chapter again this way, how are you giving yourself permission to pause?
Mm. So it's definitely a strange point in my life that I haven't been at before.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Having a kid now definitely feels more secure and easier because I have a better foundation in place
Yeah.
and I'm older and, feel prepared for that challenge. And I'd say I'm I've had to learn to give myself permission after going through what I went through of that
Mm-hmm.
extreme burnout, dark night of the soul, whatever you want to call it, period in life.
Mm-hmm.
And so this time I'm just giving myself permission to not be in hustle mode and to really enjoy what's happening right now, with the kid in high school and playing
Yes.
sports and watching, and that's fun. And preteen daughter, also very
Mm-hmm.
fun. And yeah, the newborn stage, just it, it's almost like I'm giving myself permission to just enjoy where I'm at right now
Yeah.
without that next push of like, okay, we're here. We dreamed about being here. What's next? And I do think that is important reflection because you do want to keep growing,
Yeah.
but you do want to also be able to find that right balance essentially of it's okay to stop and enjoy where you're at for a moment and give yourself space to even know what your next dream might be.
Big time. I mean, you're literally speaking about the whole reason I started our second podcast in December of 2023 called The Lazy Overachiever, which is what I identify at and most of my clients privately, because a
Uh-huh.
lot of people don't like to use the word lazy, but I
Yeah.
embrace it for that same reason. You have to be okay with infusing rest and relaxation, reflection, celebration, so that you can
Mm-hmm.
really see where it is, see,
Yeah.
beyond all the busyness and the productivity, not just the busyness, but see beyond it to be like, oh, you know what? I thought I wanted to go left. I think I want to pause right here for a minute and cruise out
Yeah.
for a little and see what happens before I go right. Because that's what I'm thinking of
Yes.
playing with. Yeah.
And that's it. It's a great luxury for sure. And it sounds very nice if you're listening. But also in that same reflection, if you are an entrepreneur and you get to this point, it's also pretty uncomfortable.
Oh, yes.
Uh, so
Hmm.
if you're listening and you get there, it's not this, I made it, let's enjoy it. It is a little uncomfortable because you're so used to dreaming what's next and chasing that, and to learn to slow down more. Um, it's it's honestly not that easy, but it's worth it. It's weird.
Yeah.
I haven't figured out how to articulate it yet, but it's definitely strange.
Yeah, it's extremely uncomfortable. I agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things that it's really simple to do, but it's not easy. And that's a conflict in and of itself because it's a contradiction of being simple but not easy. The simplest thing to do
Yes.
is to honor what you've already done, but it's not easy because you're often comparing yourself either to the version of yourself that you thought you would
Mm-hmm.
be at this point by this day and age or whatever because of someone else's expectations. We call them expired expectations here at
Mm.
Thick Bro, or because you might still be scrolling on Instagram and, and TikTok and whatever, saying, "Oh, we have the same background. Why does he, she, they get to do
Right.
X, and I'm not there yet?" When I do believe in divine timing, and I don't mean waiting for something to happen for you, but watching for
Mm-hmm.
when it's your turn, the way it's your turn for it to occur. So,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes. So just
all the yes,
giving yourself permission to take that space really, I
yeah.
think is important.
Big time. So, how can people connect with you, Ashley, to find out more about whichever hat you want to invite them to learn more about?
Sure. You can find me on LinkedIn. Just search
Hmm.
for me, Ashley Stanford. You could go to ashleyNstanford.com and you can find out all about my different businesses and connect with me in other ways there too.
That's perfect. Thank you so much for carving out time with us today to talk to myself, to the listeners, to share your story, and a little bit of energy for the littlest one, littlest Stanford to come when you
Yes.
could be taking a nap. So, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Balance Boldly listeners, as always, we are grateful that you showed up fully to play, to listen, even if you had to wear a couple of hats while you were listening, because many of you are walking multiple paths right now. And we congratulate you for the ones that you are choosing. We recognize the ones that you feel like you have a firm responsibility to. And we welcome you to put on the first hat of yourself and making sure that you are intentionally selfish enough to make space for your joy that you want to create. So, if you are new to the BBP, intentionally selfish is probably a really new thing for you to even receive. I'll just say, keep following along. There's a whole redefining of it and a whole new way of looking at making sure you put yourself at the top of the list before anyone else so everyone can get the good stuff instead of them getting the resentful leftovers. I'm Naketa Thigpen. I look forward to speaking with you next week. In the interim, you can follow me at Ask Naketa on just about everywhere. And of course, we want your questions. If you have thoughts, reflections, celebrations from what you just heard from Ashley Stanford, please make sure that you DM and or email them to asknaketa@thigpro.com so we can make sure that we keep you in the loop and keep engaging, keeping things rolling and flowing. Until next time, I want you to do as I always ask. Go and enjoy the balance of your day, but remember, do it boldly.